somehow it will be recorded. But so when I start to realize I want to do this podcast, and not even want to, I have to,
Yep.
because I started getting on all these interviews and I'm meeting so many amazing people, and I realize we never get to talk about what's behind that 30-second intro, that
Hmm.
30-second, like, tell us how you got into this. And we say the same spiel over and over again, right? Some variation of it. And there's so much more to people behind that very quick introduction. And I just have this must in me that is, I want people to have a platform to actually share who they really are and what they've actually been through. I was just talking to a really close friend of mine, and she didn't know that my dad had passed away on Christmas morning. And I've known her for, over 5 years. And it's like, these are the conversations people don't really have. So I just want to create a safe space for people to realize they're not alone. We all go through hard stuff, and we'll still do an intro, right? To go like, okay, give me the world of this person. But then, like, who are you really? And
Yeah.
really
Well,
make a difference, like a real difference.
I love that approach because that's something that I hope that people discover the longer they're in healthcare, at least on the professional side. I think it gets lost a lot, but by the schooling and the education that we're in, is that there's always a human being behind the tissues that you're treating and the labels that you're slapping on people. And when you have people that I treat, which are the chronic pain, chronic disease, autoimmune, been through a lot, I firmly believe that you can't get them to where they need to be until you unpack the life story. It's a pivotal moment of their healing. They might not realize it yet. Honestly, by the time they see me, they're kind of getting it. Because you don't find me first, you find me last. What I mean by that is you've been through just about everything else on stuff that's supposed to work or the research says it's supposed to work, and meanwhile you can't get out of bed and you're still suffering. And I've found that people connect with what I do because I've been where they are in the suffering that they're going through, and they can sense it, and I can feel it myself when I'm with them, and that's huge. That really is huge. So that's a great idea. I like it. I like it a lot.
Thank you. I mean, even just as you say that word, suffering, it it like does something to you. Like, I hear it and I'm just like, "Oh my gosh." Like, I see all the things that I've been through, like a movie. And it's just wild how we can overcome situations, and in the moment you don't know if you're going to.
Mhm.
You really don't. And it's a choice you make. And how do you actually get through it, right? Like, what are the logistical steps? Like, if someone younger than us is listening and they're going through a hard time, it's like, how do you coach them logistically through it? Like, lift your foot up and get out of bed, or do you grab a journal? Do you hire someone? Like, all those things. But we're getting real deep real quick, but that's the name of the game here.
Yep.
And that's kind of what the conversation is around, right? And I know you have experience with these things. And I don't know if a lot of people do know certain parts of your story.
They might. I certainly try to share it as often as I can so they can understand the meaning behind the things that I'm trying to teach them. I learned a long time ago just trying to be a better doctor, teacher, and educator. You got to move way beyond the facts if you want to shift the needle on changing somebody's life. And that comes from sharing your story quite often. And like you said, I mean, listen, in the background, we're all suffering in some way, shape, or form. It's the human condition, right? And then That's part of the things that connects us and binds us together. And honestly, I don't think anybody would willingly go through most of the suffering and turmoil that you're in on purpose, because that sucks. It's hard. It's not easy. So your brain would say, "Hey, let's not do that. That's way too difficult," right? But when you're going to go through that, because that's part of being here on this earth, and going in that area of um, embracing the discomfort, if you will, that's where the greatest lessons in your life come from. When you're in what I call the abyss, I call it the abyss or the darkness, or I use the analogy of quicksand a lot. Um, and when you're in quicksand, what you find is you start to panic, and then you struggle, and you try to do all these things to get out. And then what happens very often is that you get pulled in faster, you sink quicker. So that's where you have to have this pause moment and stop. And then that's where your life shifts. That's the moment. It can be where you only got one hand left out of the sand, you know, but that's where you'll grab onto someone or something, or in my world, a new way of thinking.
Mm. Yeah, that's really powerful. Like all you have is one hand left. It might be a finger
Yeah, I mean that might
and
be it.
grab
That's it. That's all you need,
anything.
though. That's all you need is that one thing or that one person. You just don't give up, right? Because I mean, if you give up, the power of the mind, of how you can sink quicker when you finally say, "I'm done." The body usually obliges you, and then you can say, "No, I'm not. I'm going to fight back." And then that's what I had to do in my journey, which I'll be happy to talk about and happy
Yeah,
to
wow.
share, of course. But those are the moments for me of why I know what I know right now, and the things that I have had to do to rescue myself and save myself. And then it turns out that a lot of other people, have benefited from what I learned along my own journey.
It's so wild, even from when we had met. Um, so your podcast was actually the first podcast I had ever been on. I was super nervous. I was like, he's such a big deal. You're like a celebrity to me, like, oh, Dr. Just like, um, and it was so cool. And, my company was called Death of the Desk at the time. And
Yep.
then I quickly learned that having the word death in your business is not good for business.
See, that's another teachable moment. That's it.
They're like, don't, it was very catchy, but people did not like that. Like people hiring didn't like just you have death in your name, death of the
Mm-hmm.
desk, and the connotation it brought. And it was that is a big learning experience for me. I had this physician she was the head of the ER department in the Chicago hospital. And we do this amazing session together. I get her out of pain, all this stuff. And this is when I was in person. And she walks out. And right before she closes the door, she turns around and goes, "Oh, and by the way, let me know when you change your business name and I'll have you come in and to the hospital and do a talk."
Mm.
And then she walked out. And I was like,
Mm. That's the universe talking to you right there.
that was, she just said it so casually.
Mm-hmm.
"Just let me know when you change your business name and I'll have you come do a talk at the hospital."
But
And I
that's
was
great
like,
that you caught that, though. You took that
caught it.
that moment. Yeah, and I
Oh,
could definitely see how that applies in the hospital setting.
totally. Change that name so quick, right? I mean, it took a year to like come up with all anyways, but yeah, just that's when I had really had a conversation with you. And I want to say that was in 2017.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, that was a few
16.
years before the zombie apocalypse hit.
Yeah,
So
yes, it was before. Oh yeah, it was before that. So 2015. It might have been 2016 actually. So
I think it
let's
might have
go.
been 16 because I was out there, I believe, at that time for a Strength Matters event, and
Oh,
that's
the
when I
San
was.
Diego.
Yeah, that's when I was doing more of my musculoskeletal approach and movement based approach to the
Mm,
chronic pain world that I was in.
yeah.
That was kind of the beginning of the journey. Soon after that, where I went off in a different direction.
Okay. So this is a perfect transition. So we'll do the introduction now that we're 13 minutes into the podcast. But hi, Dr. Perry, welcome to the podcast. This is this is the movement mentality. It's about the mentality required to be a professional in this space, in this life. And you just mentioned how you used to be, and then you took a turn, let's say around 2016, 17. So let's give everyone just that overview of who you are. And then you can go into that transition at that time when we were just kind of first starting our friendship.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. Sure. Well, I first of all, I think I've been in healthcare now since I graduated chiropractic school in 1997. So it's been a little while that I've been in this world. And zigzag, serpentine, squiggly line, and all over the place journey, honestly, from the very beginning, where it's probably best if I kind of describe that journey a little bit. I started off traditionally with chiropractic training and treating musculoskeletal type pain, low backs a lot, shoulders,
Mm.
knees, hips, necks, but almost mostly spinal stuff. But I quickly realized that there's got to be more to it than that. I didn't want to just do cookie cutter type care programs. And at that time, that just kind of seems like I was under. And it's always been sticking in my mind, like, why in the world do I have to do so much treatment on somebody and stuff doesn't last? What's up with that? Like, I'm missing something.
So
Either,
you thought this early on.
oh, I taught it right from the beginning, and I'll go, okay, there's more to it than this. I don't know what it is yet. I just know it's not what I'm doing now. And I thought, well, is people just doing things they don't know they're doing when they leave? And the answer to that is always yes. But am I just doing the same thing, but really missing something that I don't even know exists? And the answer to that is yes, I was. And then I slowly transitioned out to discover things beyond the spine. Like, holy cow, fascia's kind of cool. Maybe I should work with that. And trigger points are awesome. you know, Working with those, and those were my journey into stop chasing pain, because I'm like, wait a minute, you mean that I can have a knot on the back of my shoulder that gives me pain on the front of my shoulder? What? That kind of thing of like, don't just treat where it hurts was like a big, behind the curtain Wizard of Oz moment. And then I started looking at different body parts. Like, if your left hip hurts, maybe your right hip I should look at, or even your ankle and stuff like that. But I was still locked in the musculoskeletal system. You follow? And then I started getting to movement, and movement led me into begin to study neurology a bit, because then Mache Feldenkrais camp of brain being involved with movement was a big deal. And I started to make some really nice different kind of changes in the patients that I was seeing. But I still didn't learn the lesson yet. And I always tell people I had this closet full of all these certifications and all these trainings, but I just felt like I was even more lost every time I took something. It was just so much, but no guiding direction anywhere. I see this all the time, you know, in other healthcare professionals. And then something happened where I started to get really sick slowly over time. And I got autoimmune immune system type symptoms, pretty severe. Uh, I never really got a diagnosis of what it was. It was autoimmune, and it felt like I had every one of them, quite honestly. But everything I'd learned up to that point to try to help myself was not working. Like, nothing. It's just all the systems of my body were impacted. And I went to see a lot of other people to try to get some help, and they didn't have any answers either. And I was getting worse. And I had one finger out left in the quicksand with how bad I was. And that's the moment when that's how I can relate to people because I've been there and I had to make this decision of do I want to give up or do I want to fight? And obviously, I'm still here. So I decided the answer to that question. And I realized that I have to start to look in places I never ever thought to look at before and things that weren't even on my radar and other systems of the body. And that's when I began to really study the immune system. Like, okay, my immune system's going bananas. Let's try to figure out why it's doing what it's doing beyond just studying the brain itself, right? And neurology. And then that's when I came across learning so many things that I never even, I don't even think they even taught me in school, honestly. If they did, it was like maybe for like an hour, or maybe I wasn't paying attention. I don't know. But I just know
Right. So
that it
what
wasn't, it
year
wasn't
is
on my,
this for you?
this was, I'd say it was probably 2014 is when
Okay.
that
You're
really,
starting to
yeah, I really, and I had to look at things that I never looked at before, going back to basics and fundamentals about biology and physiology. Like starting, I have a cell, one cell. What in the heck does this thing need to work, and then why doesn't it work? So if I could figure out how one works and why one doesn't work, I'm pretty sure I could figure out how the other trillion ones work because they're all very similar. They just have different names. And that's when I got into studying energy systems of the body. And I started to think differently. I tell people I stopped thinking like a physician and I began to think more like a physicist and an electrician and an engineer. I started to see how all the systems connect to each other and depend on each other, and you can't chase symptoms and body parts and all those sorts of things. And that's when I came across working with inflammation and the via the immune system and the lymphatic system. So that brought me to where I am now, where the single biggest component that I work on for people right now is uh, how fluids move and move or don't move inside of the body. So to me, I'll be honest with you, this is what I've been looking for since I graduated school. Like, what's the reason that all these things work or don't work? And as of right now, the answer to that question for me is fluid flow. That's it. So anything that I do now whatsoever, from tissue work or therapies or nervous system or neurology, I always think to myself, how does that influence what the fluids are doing in the body? And how does the fluids in the body influence how those things work? Then, bam, that was it. But I didn't find it until I got beaten down to almost quitting. Because um, if you're not suffering like that and you're comfortable, you don't have to think differently. I mean, why would you? Everything's great. Everything's awesome. And then there comes the sledgehammer. So automatically, that's you know this from Anthony Robbins, right? I mean, you're doing things over and over, and you're expecting a different result. You got to change something up. That's it. So to me, it wasn't changing the therapy so much because the therapies only work if your thinking process is right. So that's what I teach people right now is how to think differently, and at least with my approach, with fluids and the energy systems of the body. That's it. So that's the journey that brought me here. From always having this thing in my mind that there's got to be more. There's got to be more. And no, that's not it. That's not it. But I'm trying and I'm learning and I'm doing different things. And in the beginning, when I was giving up, and how I can relate to people is that I was very mad and angry and resentful at myself, at God, the universe, whatever you believe in. And I was having this victim mentality because I was suffering. And trust me, if you have that attitude, you're not getting out of the quicksand. You're going to stay in it. And now that I came through it, I realize now why I had to go through it. Because uh, God or whatever you believe in said, listen, I'm going to hit you hard and I'm about ready. I'm going to take you out. I'm going to pitch you right to the edge. But I'm doing that because you're the person that needs to learn this stuff. You're going to get through it, but you're going to tell everybody else about it. That's why I'm doing it for you. And I firmly believe that right now, that I had to go through that to be the person that I am right now, sitting in front of this mic, talking to you right now about this.
Yeah, 100%. That what was really powerful that you said was you don't have to think differently if you're not forced to. And
Right.
that are any of us in this because everything went really well? I don't know, not most of us. And people ask me, Misty, how are you so happy and like positive? And it almost ticks me off because I'm like, do you know how relentless I had to be and still am to this day
Mm.
for that outcome, right? Like I'm relentless at doing the work, finding my weaknesses, figuring out how to sort it out, hiring people, doing this. And, you know, yeah, us in the world of healing and helping, it's like there's so much behind the person you're working with. And when you say sledgehammer been knocked down on purpose, that's a dark, wild place to be. I mean, there have been times in my life where I'm sitting there contemplating, is it worth it? I don't know if it is, Many there's been 3 times in my life where I was just like, I'm just going to call it quits. Like I'm done here. I found my dad dead on Christmas morning. My mom died in my arms. My sister had brain surgery. I had a boyfriend that was cheating on me. Our whole, like, I mean, just all these things. And you're just like, what is the point of it all?
Mm-hmm.
What are, what's the point? Who even cares? You know? And it's hard to get yourself out of that quicksand. Like I said, even if it's a finger, it might be a pinky. And you said grab onto anything. And I hear you say that, and I'm like, wow, you literally, if you have anything to hold on to, you do it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a book, if it's a person, if it's a modality, a thought, God, universe, anything you can grab, you grab it. And then your job is to then you're Spider-Man. You have a responsibility, right? It's a powerful responsibility to then help others. I mean, you don't have to help others, I guess, but in our situation, we're choosing to. And you chose to in your low times. So when you're talking about this quicksand moment in your life, or moments if it's plural, is this like a physical, is this you talking about your autoimmune issues, or is it other stuff? Like what it, like for me it would, those low points were death and things like that, which
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like was in your situation.
Well, I think it's always both. You cannot separate the physical body from the spiritual and emotional and mental part of things. There's many people uh, who've had death and trauma in their life, and that is often the catalyst for a severe illness. The threshold breaks on the capacity for your body to tolerate the stress of all that hitting you, And, its option at that point is to just kind of shut down on you, right? And you get sick. And some people really get pulled into that abyss, and they honestly don't get out of the abyss or the quicksand from all the physical modality treatments, because you need to have the mental emotional side of it too. So yeah, I mean, but I'm always thinking to myself, why in the hell am I getting an autoimmune disease? What's up with that? Like, why does my body, because I don't believe in this, your body turning on itself BS. All right. The body's not stupid. It never does anything without a reason. It's always a reason. And that reason is protection. You just have to figure out why it's using that crazy strategy to do it for you. All right. Because if you go into your body with all this resentment on it, trust me, that's not going to work out well for you. So it's a good way for me to kind of have this conversation with my body and say, what's the deal here? Right. And then I look back on my life of the things that I've gone through all of it. I've had uh, death of a father, and trauma, and been through cancer survival, and lost my first chiropractic business, and failed things, and just all of that stuff has added to the things for over my life. But I was the kind of person that would say, well, I'm just going to put that deep. I'll set that aside. You know, I'll deal with that later, or the, man up kind of stuff. Right. And you can do that for a little while, but that you're going to have to cast that check at some point. And that's kind of what it was for me, is a mixture of both. I needed to look at what my body was having to do all those times to try to deal with what was happening from the trauma from a physiological standpoint. So I dealt with the physical side, and when I could finally get half my body out of the quicksand, you follow that analogy, then I was able to say, oh, there's a whole other side I got to go into as well. But I wasn't ready to see that until all this rocked layer got crushed, and that's what the abyss was for. I wouldn't have let those go if I didn't hit the abyss, right?
Hmm.
So, and the mixture of both of those approaches is what I needed to heal myself, and that got me into an area of healthcare that I was never ventured into, and that's the emotional based side and the trauma side. So that's always weaved into the work that I do, because I tell everybody that, listen, I mean, I don't, sometimes I tell them it depends on the relationship I have with them, but if you walk through my door, I already know you're in the quicksand and you have all those things. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there. So you may not realize it yet. I know it, but we have to go in slowly. So you're one, you have to be ready to accept it. And most people are not ready to accept it until you're at rock bottom. Because then you're like, okay, Dr. Perry, I've tried everything in the world and nothing has helped. You're my last hope. I'm going to give you a shot. And I'm like, okay, now you're ready. Now you're ready.
Okay, so two questions. One is, when you say now you're ready,
Mm-hmm.
what do you specifically mean by that? Is there a question you ask, or do you say, here's this talk therapist I know, or like, what is that?
Yeah, well, I think now that they're ready, is it's a realization that there's more to it than just treating their label and their diagnosis and their side of pain. Because I
Okay.
always ask, always ask them, if all that stuff is what you needed, why are you here? Because you would be better by now. You wouldn't need a different approach. Because I already know the approach you have now ain't what you need, because you're still suffering. So you have to think differently. So what you're
Mhm.
ready for is a different way of looking at things. Your awareness has changed. And that's the kind of people that the only kind of people that are going to understand why I'm talking to you about brain fog and I'm looking at your liver. Because if you don't understand, first of all, if you don't understand the body, you're never going to get that anyway.
Yeah.
But then that's when you realize that when my liver has something to do with my brain fog. I'm like, yeah, like a lot. And that's scope of, oh, I get it. I get it. I don't have somebody saying, can you show me the double blind research study on liver and brain fog? No, I don't have to, because you got to go back to school and understand how physiology works. That's where you got to go. Because some people might not be smart enough to look at how the liver relates to brain fog in a research study. You understand what I'm saying? So that's what I have this saying, that no system in the body ever works alone, never gets injured alone, never heals alone. There's no such thing as an isolated injury in the body. There's no such thing as isolated healing. It's all or nothing until lights out. But unfortunately, in Western medicine, we do the exact opposite. Everything is a piece, everything is a part, everything is a specialty, and they don't talk to each other. And the body's like, hey, I'm one piece. I don't care what kind of name you give all these parts. I don't even know what the names are. You gave them to me. I'm just doing my thing. And I'm going to keep crushing you and taking you out until you learn to think different. And that's where I come in. Because then when I show it to you, you're like, oh my goodness, you know what? That makes complete sense. How come nobody ever told me this before? And to which I say, that's a really good question. But now that you see it, you can't unsee it. You just saw the matrix. You just saw the matrix.
Yeah, it's so wild. It's just so wild. I love how you said, I don't even know the names of these parts. You gave them to me.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's
Because
just
I'm
parts.
horrible. Yeah, like I'm horrible at like origins and insertions. I'm like, I used to know them, but I didn't find it as valuable. So you know how you like let stuff go? Like I used to
Yeah,
speak Tagalog, what my Filipino family speak. I don't speak it anymore because I don't use it. It's like
yeah.
I stopped using these, and it's just funny. Like we made these names up.
Well, yeah, I
That's
tell people said knowing the names of these things are absolutely irrelevant. And I jokingly say all the time, you can call your liver a frying pan. You can call your brain an iPhone. I don't care what you call them. I want you to know how your frying pan and your iPhone relate to each other. So it's not the names, it's how do they work together? How do they talk to each other? And how do they watch each other's back when there's a problem with one? Because that's what happens. It's like a community that always talks to each other, especially with fluid flow. And they're like, hey, we know that the left kidney guy over here is struggling a little bit with his blood flow. So can somebody else help him out a little bit? And then they'll start to send some of the blood flow over there because they're trying to help out. And you don't even know it's doing it, because that's its job. Its job is supposed to heal you, recover, and regenerate, and have you not feel pain, because it doesn't want to hurt any more than you do. And it runs in the background until the options to solve problems for it has run out. And then that's when it sends you a signal of pain. I need some help, right? And it's telling you at that point, I need you to change your behavior, change something. I don't know what the answer to that is yet. I just know that it needs to be different than what you are right now. And I can tell you the answer when it's chronic is it's usually not where you're going to point your finger as to where your pain is. It's probably going to be somewhere else, because as you and I know, or one of our favorite people in the world, Dr. Eric Cobb, he said a line during one of his lectures that I use all the time, is that you're allowed to have more than one problem. And I just loved that line because it's true. And just because this problem hurts the most doesn't mean that's your biggest problem either. Right? So, but you're not ready. I'm cycling back to what I was saying before. You're not ready to accept that until you've gone down the traditional, brainwashing program of just where the pain is. Then you have to think. I tell people all the time, you have to think for yourself. And
You
that's really
have to.
what I tried to do is give the people possible uh, solutions, things to check off that you probably never thought to actually look at. You see that in the world all the time in neurology. I mean, I love the work you do with your eyes. How many people do you know in our world and the people you work with who have chronic neck pain, getting massages, getting chiropractic, getting x-rays, MRIs, and nothing works, and everybody keeps cranking on it and says, I don't understand why. And then you look at their eyes and you say, well, no wonder. Let me just fix your eyeballs a little bit. And then they say, that's the craziest thing in the world. And you go, no, it's not crazy. It's just neurology. And that's the same kind of stuff in my world in relationship to like an immune system problem or a liver problem. Like say, I've always had brain fog, doc. I've always had pain in my feet and nothing gets better in my feet. And I go into the middle of their abdomen and release the stagnated lymphatics in the largest lymph node in the body. And I unstagnate the backflow of vein flow and liver flow, vein and lymph in the liver. And then they say, doc, that's the craziest thing in the world. My headaches feel better. My brain fog is less. And even the tingling in my feet that everybody told me was neuropathy or plantar fasciitis is better. And I didn't even go anywhere near their feet. The beautiful part about my world is that, let's say, you came in to see me and both of your feet hurt. And most of the time, everybody's done everything to your feet, which is a good thing because, sometimes you find a unicorn. Sometimes that might be it. If it's both feet, it's probably not, by the way. And so, but then I'm like, automatically, I have to look at something different than your feet, but then I have to look at a different system than your feet, not the musculoskeletal, just a fascial system. That's where you go maybe higher up, like I told you before, or you go even in the brain and help that work better, and then the feet get better. But you can't even conceive to look into those places until that abyss happens. And how do I know that? Because I didn't look at those places either all those years until I was in it. So I always tell people The Matrix is not a movie, it's a documentary. So I use that movie all the time to say, you're just in the Matrix. I don't blame you because nobody showed you the Matrix. I'm only going to blame you when I show you the Matrix and you choose to leave again. Right? Like, it's there. And it gives people hope because it happens all the time. And I'm sure it happens with you. People even say, this is the first time people have really listened to me and talked to me and told me that I wasn't out of my head or I wasn't all in my mind. And 10 times out of 10, when they're in my office, they usually have a human being moment and they start to cry because they feel validated, they feel heard, and I'm showing them empathy because I've been there. I got the same thing when I was sick. I had surgeries after surgeries. I had medicine after medicine. And then I was just sinking faster and faster and faster until I had that catalyst moment. And that's the driving force for what I teach people now. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Makes total sense. I'm following, I'm picking up what you're putting down.
I had a doctor once
So,
who, this guy, I can't remember the book he wrote, but he was an emergency room physician for 30 years. And the reason he went into ER, because he said the ER is pretty straightforward. Like if there's a knife in somebody, I know how to help that. Right? Because he said I really disliked the world of like chronic pain, lifestyle, autoimmune stuff, which is taking everybody out because the model that they have for emergency medicine is perfect. The model that they have for that will not work for the chronic disease, lifestyle behavior models. It will not work, period. So he said, at least I knew what I was dealing with here. And I thought that was very enlightening. And he would always ask people this question when they had something happen to them. He says, Why now? Why today? Now, obviously, if you got stabbed, I mean, that's an easy one because you got stabbed, right? But if you have a problem, why did you not feel this yesterday? Why did you not feel this last week? And most people go, I don't know, doc. That's why I'm here to see you. And then he gives the proverbial best reply. But if you did know, and then that's when they go, well, he gave an example once of this guy who was coming in and he was having testicular pain, like really killing him. He said, oh, I can't find anything on there. He said, why do you think? He said, hey, but if you did know, and his wife said, doc, could this have anything to do with my wife wanting me to get a vasectomy? And you go, yeah, probably, right? Like the burrow in the brain and the manifesting the symptoms. And then but I extrapolate it this way. Why did you feel something today that you didn't feel yesterday? Or there's probably been brewing in you for 20 years because your body is really, really good at compensation and adaptation and healing and sending stuff from here to there. So you don't feel something. But eventually it hits a point where it's got nothing left in the tank. And that's why you can't go in and get a magic treatment and be all better in the next day when you have those problems, because you have to dig deep and you got to go far back and you have to ask a lot of questions and you have to look at the history and look at things that most people will think are completely irrelevant. And that's where you're going to find your answer most often, especially when they're very, very difficult cases. Most of my stuff are accumulation of stuff that's been happening for easily 20 years for people. But that's not the lens that medicine looks through. They're looking for A causes B is a linear relationship. But I'm like, well, that's not going to work out well because the body is nonlinear. An A can give you a Z. An A can give you a freaking number. It can give you a 5. It can do whatever it wants. So that's where they get lost because of the trauma model. I did this and then this happened, but that won't work in relationship to stuff. Like people say, why should I look at my lymphatic system? Well, my universal answer is because you got one. That's the biggest reason. And how do you know you have a lymphatic system problem? And my answer is the same, because you got one. Like, you just have to look at it and see and check these boxes, these system boxes off to help people. And just the kind of conversation that I have with them when they can see all these different systems working together and how much their body is actually trying to help them, that can reframe their whole nervous system to be the grab on from the pinky that's hanging off out the sand. That can be it.
Mm-hmm. So, with all that said, the second question I have for you personally is, when you were in that quicksand, you said you were about halfway out, and now you had the bandwidth, the awareness, the space to then consider these emotional aspects of what you've been dealing with and been suppressing and putting on the side. I call it putting in the parking lot.
Yeah, right.
What was you just park it, get back to it when you get back to it. But what was the first step that you took in that realm? Was it, NET? Was it Reiki? Was it a talk therapist? Like, what is that first? You're halfway out of the quicksand. You're now open to it. Then what?
That's a good question. So one of the reasons I started to look elsewhere is because I'd exhausted everything I knew up to that standpoint to try to make a difference on the physical side.
With your physical stuff.
Yeah, with
Yeah.
the approach to, working with my immune system, working with the gut, working with the lymph, and doing all these things. And, I was 50% better, which felt glorious. First of all, my brain could function better because I didn't have so much neuroinflammation. So I could get out of survival mode because my brain inflammation was decreasing, right? Because you're always going to be in that mode when you have brain inflammation. And so I could actually start to see through the clouds, if you will. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't anything that really happened intentionally. It was just more, I had more awareness. Like, you can't control something till you become more aware of it. And I always tell people it's almost like the law of resonance. You see it all the time. It's like, if you start thinking about buying a certain car, then every time you look somewhere, it's like, okay, when did everybody get this car? Like, you seriously? And it's always been there the whole time. You just never notice it because you weren't looking for it. It wasn't an awareness part. So what happened is that stuff just started coming across my pathway of different things in my life. Of somebody would mention like a book here, or mention like a podcast here, or I honestly see stuff kind of showing up in my feed that normally didn't even register on my radar, because I'm like, yeah, emotion based stuff, I'm not ready for that. Then all of a sudden I'm like, huh, you know,
You
and
talking
I
to
think,
me?
yeah, like, oh, I see. It's at that proverbial, remember that parable or whatever, the guy who was in a hurricane, and then this rowboat comes by and he says, no, I'll pass, I'm waiting for God to come to save me. And then a helicopter comes by, I'm waiting for God to save me. And then he ends up dying and he goes to heaven and he goes, God, you didn't save me. And he goes, yeah, well, I sent you the rowboat and I sent you the helicopter. What do you want from me? It's like, same thing. Now I'm just ready to see it. But I think at that moment, the first book that caught my mind was by Peter Levine, who I recently had on my podcast, who's the father of somatics, who wrote Waking the Tiger. And I liked the book because I just thought it was really cool looking. And I like tigers. And I even have a tiger tattooed on my arm because I've been studying tiger dragon Qigong for many years. And the tiger came out at me and I'm like, okay. As soon as I started to read that book, I'm like, that's it. That's it. That was the thread that I pulled, like string theory. You pull this thing and you realize it's attached to everything else in the universe moment, right? And then
Yeah.
I just started to really read it, but then get it, right? It's like Coach Dan John. I know you know Dan John, who's like so
Yeah.
brilliant. He goes, you can read things over and over and over, but you don't get everything that you're reading until you're ready for it. Like, I've read books over and over, and then I go back at something. I said, how in the world did I miss that? That's a gem. That's so good. But I didn't see it the first time because I wasn't ready to learn it at that time. And I hadn't grown enough to understand it. You know what I'm saying? So that's one of the reasons why
Mm-hmm.
I go over things over and over and over, and basics and fundamentals like that, because then it starts to piece together. So Peter Levine, I would have to say, was the first one that I began to read. And plus I loved the somatics. He's talking about the body involved with the mind. It wasn't just going into the talk therapy approach, which can be very helpful for people, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't, I kind of knew that it wasn't what I needed. And me knowing the neurology at that time, of understanding how the brain and body connection for things, and then that split moment that you have in your brain to interpret things to change the output. Yeah, that was a big aha moment for me. And that is when it all started to click. So I know when I work with all of my clients, I usually will bring it up at the time when I think that I feel their nervous system's ready to answer it, if you will, or understand it, about if they've looked on the emotion based side of things. And so, here's the thing: sometimes they have, and sometimes they haven't. Because I have a lot of people who do the emotion based things, but that still hasn't moved them past the physical things. And that just means that in my world, they need some physical things done they haven't had yet. And then that can be what can ricochet back and help the emotional side. But I also know
Mhm.
that, you know, the without going too deep into here, the nervous system won't let go of a lot of these physical things if it doesn't feel you're ready to survive on your own without ripping away all the emotional ones you've needed as scaffolding so you don't wither away and die.
Right.
Because you need
And
those. I mean, they're
y
they're serving a purpose for you as a protection. And if you rip that stuff away, you can fall into chaos. And the body's not gonna let you do that.
right. I mean, it's wild. I hired this EMDR therapist a couple years ago,
Huh.
and I at that time I was dealing with insomnia and body image stuff because of these babies I had, and
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm just gonna give this a go. I just kind of want to see what happens. They know some stuff about eyes, so I already like them,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
then I don't know how to teach this, stuff they do. So I was like, let me hire someone. And I tell her about my insomnia and my childhood, my dysfunctional family, and like all these things, right? And I was so shocked to hear this, but it's based on what you just said. She said, I'm actually not comfortable doing EMDR with you yet. You are very high functioning, and I'm nervous about what could happen if we open this Pandora's box and you don't have things in place for that to happen. I need to talk to some colleagues about this. Let me get back to you like this. And I mean my jaw was on the floor. I mean I was
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yep.
"What?" So we actually never did EMDR like actually did it. It was just all this other stuff. And we never did it. And that's what I hired her for, but she was like, "I don't based on my lifestyle and like me running the businesses the way that I do, and I'm kind of masculine in business as in like it's like, I'm always working on it and whatever." And she's like, "I just don't know what's going to happen if we go there." And I was like, "Well, now I'm kind of scared, because I've got this life down and I have this whole thing down. So what would happen? I have no idea. Like we're going to crack something open, my matrix glitch."
Yeah, you
I,
very well. First of all, you're really lucky that you came across such a good therapist there, because not many people realize that. They kind of jump in and want to rip away
crack
all
you
the
open.
emotional things for you because it's supposed to be helpful, but that's why it's very, very individual. I learned that from studying the internal family systems model by Dr. Schwartz. He talked about these all these, and I love this because everything traces back ultimately to the neurology and the nervous system, and that everything that your body is doing is a protective role, period, no matter what it is, including all of these patterns that you think are dysfunctional. Well, at one point, they were highly functional because it's what you needed in that moment to get through something that could have been far worse for you. And the brain loves to repeat patterns that worked for it in the past because it worked. And how do I know it worked? Well, because you're not dead. That's how I know it worked. So, because I always jokingly say that it's hard to heal and be happy if you're dead. The brain doesn't care about happiness and no pain. It just wants you taking a respiratory breath, right? So it's using those strategies to help you. And then the internal family systems model, most of it, a lot of it is based on the patterns that you needed when you were a child because you needed to protect the 10-year-old, or in my case, it was probably the 14-year-old that watched my father die in front of me from a brain tumor. So, that
Mm.
stuff, those patterns that my nervous system will use for the 48-year-old man that I was at the time going through this crisis, right?
Yeah. Well,
So
that's
that
so that moment, I really would love to just talk about that. So I didn't know that about you. I don't know if many
hmm,
people do. You were 14 and you saw this happen? Like it was like an instant or was it
no, well, it was
okay.
something that yeah, I don't usually talk about. This is probably like the biggest trauma that happened to me in my whole life. This one. So he got sick over time with
Mhm.
a glioblastoma, a brain tumor. But he's like every kid usually, or hopefully, if you're blessed, you have a child that has a great father, worships their father. They like larger than life, and he was the kind of person that would just push through things, cover things up, not share things, and even though he was sick and having things happen, and nobody else knew, so he would just push through. Take a bottle of aspirin a week, kind of thing, until it got to the point where it was just too bad. So I got to see him go from how your dad is here and being able to do everything with him to where he was just lying on a sheet, just a shell of himself with the chemo and all that stuff, and he could barely function. And me living in that environment, so I got pulled out of that environment and moved because my parents were divorced and my mother was remarried, living up in New Jersey. Because I was born and raised in the deep south of Virginia, so I was with him. And then I moved up to New Jersey, and then shortly after I came up here, he passed away. So a lot of that was because I was powerless to do anything to help, or I felt that way because it was just, but I was 14. But also that I left and wasn't there at when he needed me the most. You know what I mean? So it was kind of like that um, abandonment emotion, as well as something I guess you didn't do enough kind of thing, even though you're 14. But you still have that rumbling inside at 48. Those patterns can come back for you in many, many different ways. So, and that's one of the reasons why I ended up moving up to New Jersey because of the tragedy that happened there. So that was a big flip for me, being this. I always tell people it's the reverse Footloose movie, where I'm the guy with the cowboy hat going into the big city the other way around. So I grew up in a really, really small rural town, and I moved up into this is 1980, 81, outside New York City in a town where I was just like an alien. And so um, big cultural shift shock for that. Um,
Yeah,
so
huge. So
yeah, but I
so
think
you're
honestly,
for
before I move on, I think that's one of the reasons
yeah.
why maybe I have this interest today of why I do so much work in relationship to neuroinflammation and the brain, because of what happened to him. I didn't go the medical
Yeah.
route, but I ended up coming on the back end through the other side for what I'm doing
Yeah.
with it now. So
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh no, I don't think we mean to interrupt each other at all. It's so so this happens to you at 14
Mm-hmm.
and then you're 48 and how you very easily identified I felt powerless and I felt guilt for not
Mm-hmm.
doing more. And
Mm-hmm.
I deeply relate to both of those with both of my parents' deaths, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I carry a lot of regret and guilt for not doing more and
Yeah.
not knowing more. If I would have this, if I would have that, maybe and it is something I'll probably have to work on for my entire life if we're being honest. So you've identified those two things. How have you logistically dealt with those two issues? Like, them, but now, like, do you journal? Do you How did you get to that? Do you have peace with it yet, or are you still working on that as well?
I think it's a mixture of both. I have peace, but I'm also still working on it because it was a deep wound. I mean, they never go away, right? But uh, the awareness that it was there helped me begin to take control of it. And it's like I always tell people with pain, or these they say, "Doc, can you help me cure this or cure that?" And I say, "There's no cure for pain. There's only management. You either manage to have it or you manage to not have it. And maybe your lifestyles and your behaviors and your mindset will all play a role in whether you got it or not, right?" So I say the same thing with the emotion stuff. It's a continual process, a management process, a lot of healing. So I've always journaled. That's something that's been very important to me because I can think better when I put things down. And
Okay.
we know anyway from the brain how much better it works when you get your hand involved in writing and then piecing things
Mhm.
together. Yeah, that's why I go old school with a paper journal and this thing called a pencil and a pen. You know, I don't do like the electronic ones. Even when I do my teachings and my workshops, I do post-it notes and I lay things out. That's how my mind compartmentalizes things. But I've also sought other things and working on the more spiritual side of things, spiritual healers, shaman, uh, um, energy healers, things that I've really opened up to since I had that moment. It's almost like the people who come to from a near death experience and they find a different side of their spirituality or the world that they didn't see or were ready for at that moment. That's why the energetic side of medicine has been a big appeal for me. And it just so happened to work out perfectly because when you get down to it on the Western medicine side of healing, it's all energy systems anyway. So you know it's just the cellular metabolic processes is energy. So they're all saying the same things, and this is where I have to say probably one of the most critical moments of helping myself heal was understanding the power of words and language. Because
Mm.
I forgot who said it, but they said words are neurological events. And I sat with that for a moment. I'm like, oh my goodness. Like the words
Mm.
that you choose to write, the words that you choose to say, they make a difference on your physiology. They change your nervous system. They change your immune system. They're going to change somebody else's nervous system. But it's not even the ones that you say out loud. It's the ones that you say in your head, which are the most toxic of all. Because one, you don't even know you're saying them anymore because you're just so used to saying them. So you don't even know they're there anymore. And we always talk to ourselves in the most absolutely horrific way possible. And I realized, oh my goodness, I think I hate myself. Like, or I've never liked who I am inside. And that goes back to when I was young. I was fat. I was overweight. I was shy. I got picked on. So I always hated what I thought that everybody was picking on. And then so when you say those things over and over and over, and you realize now on, holy cow, the neuroplasticity and forming a groove. And I had to really practice um, changing my language and my speaking. And so I would change the words that I used, and whew, it was not easy. Oh my goodness. It's like, I felt like I'm treading in water in the middle of the ocean. It takes practice, right? But you can't change it till you become aware of it. And then I've changed the word, but then I found the superpower of the words by changing the tonality of the words. That's when I realized, and I started to play these, not games, if you will, but it's almost like experiments of with myself, but with others, because I'm working with people who are really, so many people are suffering in the background. How much you have no idea, because they put this mask on of everything is great, and I know it's not. And I would try the changes I would notice their words, and I'm like, holy cow, there's the words, same words. Then I would start to try to throw some of my words in there, or the change of the tones of my words, and then I would start to notice their physiology and immune system shifting, and then I noticed mine was shifting because theirs was shifting. And that reminded me of a quote that I can't remember. Her name is Barrett. She was on my podcast. It'll come to me. And that's when all this stuff really clicked. She said, the best thing for a human nervous system is another human nervous system. And then she followed up with that. And she said, the worst thing for a human nervous system is another human nervous system. And that's when I'm like, that's it. Right. So
I have
language and
chills.
words, that's one of the things that I really concentrate on the most. And also, honestly, it made a difference in how I communicated my message to others, in my teachings, but definitely in social media. Like
Mm.
I know we may be running low on time, but it was something interesting. When I've been doing this a long time, and I've had followers for a long period of time, but there was a time when I had a lot of inflammation still, and I really wasn't doing well, but I had this underlying anger and resentment, like, that was inside of me that I really didn't notice. But I think it came across in the tone and the words that I use when I used to post online. The reason I say that is because sometimes I go back and I look at them and go, oh man, you were a jackass, right? Like, as I can see it now. But at one point, a lot of people, trolls were hitting me pretty hard at one time, like all the time. And I just thought, well, that's just part of putting your stuff out there, right? People banging on you hard. But then I realized, because as I started to shift and change, my the because you can absolutely have a tone or an energy to when you post something, the way you say it, the way it's called intention of that. It's almost like I will be posting ready for a fight. Okay. But then I
Mm.
shifted, and I'm posting in a more of a place of love, and I'm trying to show them, like, here's why I'm seeing this, and this is, maybe you'll see it too, kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, I don't have anything. Like, the troll stuff just stopped. And I'm like, well, what the hell was the difference? I'm like, I was the difference. Right. And then that's when the stuff hit me of uh, resonance and frequencies, and the stuff that you put out into the universe that you don't even know that you're putting out in the universe finds its way back to you. And that's why these mindsets of, hey, you're Missy, you're always happy. And I'm like, well, I may not be that way, but I'm putting it out there, because I can tell you this much, though. If I put out misery, I'm going to get it back. And I don't want that. So I like my odds on the happy side. you know? That makes sense. So it's
Oh
so
yeah.
much. So this journey for me has been so much of a self discovery, of healing in many different areas. Of things just started showing up now that I was ready to see them.
After your halfway point, you
Yeah,
read this book, and then you unravel with the string, and the words are a what was it? The words are a
words are neurological events.
neurological event. Oh,
That's a super,
It's
listen, that is a superpower of healing right there, because you can control the words that you choose to say to yourself, think to yourself, and say to others, just like you can control your breathing. And that's what's so empowering about helping your nervous system, is the sense you have control again. Because one of the neuroscientists that I learned from, named Bo Lotto, said a phrase to me that really stood out. He said, the number one stressor for the human nervous system is uncertainty, lack of control, and not knowing. And that makes sense to us because we know the brain is designed to take in information to try to predict what's going to come next so it doesn't freak out. So if you have all those uncertainty things, the brain's always going to go to the worst case scenario, because that's just a safe bet. Because it's better to assume there's a tiger behind the bushes than your friend Bob. Because if you're wrong, you're dead. And when you understand that, and you know the science behind things, or the neurology behind things, and why humans do what they do, um, and then that's really empowering. It's not easy to be around other people, because you're going to have a lot of toxic individuals in this world that you may or may not be able to escape from, depending on the situation that you're in. But at least you know that you can have a buffer zone between what comes out of their mouth and then what goes into your head.
and vice versa, right? What you're
Yeah.
saying to others, even when someone is toxic, let's say, or they don't serve you, you don't have to treat them poorly back, even though they might, right? Like, I was listening to this lawyer guy who has like 5 million followers on Instagram because he's like this professional word, he's good with words, right? On the
Oh, I
Mel
think he's
Robbins
the one who
podcast.
does it. He's the one who does it from his car. I think I know you're
His
talking about.
car, right. And he says that if even if you don't like someone or they're toxic or all these things, that doesn't mean you act like them, or like if they say, "Oh, hey, what time is it?" You don't then go, "Ugh, well, it's 2:15." You you still be you, and you don't have to go farther than that. You don't have to be best friends, you don't have to interact, you don't have to, but you still respond with like it's 2:15, even if you
Yeah.
don't like them. Because from the outside, if there were 5 people nearby watching this interaction
Mm-hmm.
and you lower yourself to them, you're the one who looks like the jerk, basically.
Right.
Right? It's
Absolutely.
it's a
Yep.
even though you're not, but you were because you don't like that. And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." So putting up I don't know if you heard this. I know you love the woo woo, so I can go here. But when I feel some kind of, "Ooh, I don't want that,"
Mm-hmm.
I literally put up a very thin shield
Yeah.
in front of my body, and it's permeable. It's very thin.
Mm-hmm.
It's thinner than a piece of paper, but I put it up and I just exhale and I smile and I let them do whatever human machinery thing they're doing.
Yeah.
And I just put that shield up and I just don't let it hit me. And one kind of visualization I've learned was like, you put a color on them. So let's say this person is navy blue and my
Mm-hmm.
shield is copper. You can picture their color coming at you, but not blending into your color. It can
Yeah.
kind of touch it or go near it or swirl around, but don't let it mix
Yeah.
and turn into another color or whatever. So, kind of a visualization practice. But
Well, those I
this,
love that. That's one of the reasons I gravitated towards qigong and studying it for many years, because
mm,
they do a lot of the visualizations for the organs. They have a color,
mm,
right? They have a sound.
oh,
Then they always picture that your organs are smiling back at you. And so you can use the power of visualization, now that is substantiated so much by the current brain and neuroscience. And I have to say that that's probably one of the most helpful things for me when I came across though Eric and Z Health were just the simple uh, brain function maps of, and I've seen these before, like in the past with some self help books, but I didn't really grasp it yet. Of I think one of the first things I saw with Z Health was a picture where they say, you have this input coming into the brain, and then you have the output side, but then there's a space in the middle for the interpretation part. And the space on most people, and it was for me, was like razor thin, like almost invisible. But it's there, right? And in the beginning, you don't even think that there is a space because you just react to things, especially if you're in fight or flight mode because you're in survival mode. But realization that the space is there over time, then you can make that space bigger. And then that's where you can choose your response. You can respond as opposed to reacting. So that's when that navy blue toxic person comes on in. And then you've got the second that's bigger because you've practiced it more. You've put your reps in of your neuroplasticity. Then you can decide what the hell your output is, because that interpretation, I mean, that's all storybooks anyway, from your how you're seeing the world and what your past is. So your input, as they say, can literally freaking mean anything. It's the out, that's just the meaning part of it. And then I ask myself, well, who the hell gives it the meaning part? Oh, I do. I give it the meaning part,
Which no one
right?
wants to know that. Oh, I'm responsible?
Right. Yeah, exactly. You could, and listen, I tell people this is like, I can't even fault them for it being difficult to do that, because one, they might not even realize that that's a possibility, because unlike us, 99% of the world doesn't look at stuff about the brain. And you, the second part is that you don't know that it's even a possibility in there, but it takes that practice part to be able to say, oh, okay, I can give it the meaning that it needs to have. And then, but one of the reasons it's so difficult, this is what I wanted to say, is there's so much inflammation in people's body and they're locked in fight or flight that it's very difficult to make that space work, because we're so locked in go, 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 go. And even cycling back to what I said before is that you probably won't hit that reset button or know the button is there until you're already in the quicksand. So you're revisiting back where change must happen.
Mm,
That's the moment that things must change. And that's usually the only time most people do change, quite honestly, right?
mm, the
When
must.
the pain gets bad enough, the proverbial, well, it doesn't hurt that bad. Maybe it'll go away. I'll cover it up. I'll take 50 pills. I'll deal with it later. And then the body says, I'm going to win this fight, right? Like, I'm going to take you out. You're going to have to confront this at some point. And I'm doing it because I love you, right? And then sledgehammer. But we just ignore the subtle little, hey, man, you need to, don't do that. Ah, shut up. Okay. I'll be quiet for a little while, but I'm coming back. And then bam. Yep. You get run over by an 18 wheeler. Then yesterday I didn't have an autoimmune disease, and today I got one. No, you didn't. You've been building it up for your entire life. And then that's when the avalanche happens.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's when I noticed that too. When I noticed that when I was really, really sick, I would get very reactionary to things. Like I could notice my immune system go up, almost like people were, almost like a histamine reaction in a way, where my eyes would get really teary and red, my skin would become itchy, my tinnitus, my ears would start ringing when I got like that. And then I noticed those symptoms would happen when I began to get stressed about a social media post. Like I'm reading something that upset me, and I'm like, what the heck is happening here? My nervous system went up, my immune system went up, and all these symptoms went. And then it's almost like the moment of like discovering like a light switch. You mean if I put this up, the light comes on? If I push it down, it goes off? What? That's the coolest thing in the world. And that's why I realized with this is that in a moment, I could begin to take that down. Or I'd see something that normally would upset me, and then I would normally want to go back on and reply back because I'll show you, right?
Mhm.
Now all I did was I go swipe, I just delete it. Then all of a sudden, my whole body began to calm down, and I'm like, oh, this is the superpower right here. This is the superpower. That's the control.
It really is. I call it now the block and bless.
Yeah, I like that. Yep,
Block and bless. Like, you
that's it.
know, I mean, I've reached out to you a couple times actually because I'm new to the lots of followers world, and I thought everyone was kind to each other in this world, um and I would just do like a random like I taught a nerve glide today, and someone was like, oh, you think you're a doctor? And I'm like,
Right,
what? I
right.
taught a nerve glide. What do you?
Yeah.
And I go, okay, I can respond, and I can and I just
Nope. Yeah.
swipe, block and bless, because
Well,
it only says more about them.
right. And, listen, I started to change my reframe too, is that, the universe is going to throw stuff at you like that to test you. And I'm going to say, okay, you know, Perry or Missy, they're going to go down this new pathway, and I'm going to see just how much they own it. I'm going to throw some tests your way. And that's what they are, right?
Mm,
To see what your resolve is. Can you walk that talk? And you're probably going to fail out at the first couple times, but that's what it's there for. And then eventually you learn and you get that point and you let it go. So for me, that's just the universe doubling down on trying to help you out.
that's true. And what's funny is everything is a skill, right? So the first time it happened to me, I could say to myself, I do not have the skills to deal with this. I actually don't know how to handle this. Should I respond? Should I delete it? Should I block them? Should I, right? And I reached out to a lot of people. One of them was you. And I just said, how do you handle this? And I think you were probably transitioning into your like more calmer phase at this point.
Probably.
And it was just, you're just like, you ignore it, you delete it. And I was like, that's it. Um, but it took those repetitions of to go, oh, this comes with the territory. And a big shift for me, it's a really odd example, but it's true, is I have a girlfriend who has over 500,000 followers, and she talks about plants, like
Mm-hmm.
literally just how to water them, how to cut them, soil. Like, I mean, she's right.
Yeah.
She's about to do a deal with Target. She's very famous for her plants. And people will say stuff horrible to her, like, you
About
should have your
plants.
children taken from you. Your child should go to child protective services because all you care about are plants. Like, horrible things are said to her. Like, you should have your kids taken away? Like, what? And so I
Yeah.
realized it doesn't matter what I talk about. There's
Nope.
going to be someone who says your kid should be taken away because you have a plant account. And so that actually helped me like settle into it actually doesn't matter what you talk about. You could be talking about freaking plants and there's going to be
Yeah, I'm so
people
glad you had that
trolling and hating.
realization. Whenever you put yourself out there and you're going to try to change the world or be authentically you, that's part of it. That's one of the reasons why a lot of people actually don't do it, or they don't put the true their true selves out there. Most of the stuff on social media is fake anyway, right? And I had you probably know her, I'm sure, Sue Falsoni. Um, Sue Falsoni is a great athletic trainer, a friend of mine, and she put up something once that I use all the time. She said, "You can be the biggest, ripest, orangest, juiciest orange you've ever seen, and there's always somebody who doesn't like oranges." Well said. Yep. Like, it's just, hey, that's who I am, and if you don't like me, that's okay. Go have your grapefruit. I'm just not for you. But if you
I'm not
like
a grapefruit.
oranges, yeah, if you're like oranges, I'm your jam. I'm where you want to be, right? That's how you
Yeah.
have to go about it, especially when you realize what we talked about over this last hour or so of how that stuff affects you physiologically. There will be a
It's so
correlation at some point
yeah.
of time of chronic inflammation, chronic disease, and social media use, without question.
Oh yeah, if not already, right? It
Yeah, because I think
it's a
that's just the
very
people
high stressor.
what they call common sense that you don't see a lot of in medicine. But yeah, it has to be because you're dealing with a dynamic human being with feelings and emotions, and they're very easy to trigger.
Yeah, exactly. So, I have two questions for you to
Sure.
end and wrap up. And one of them is if you could tell your younger self anything,
Hmm.
what would you say to young Perry?
That's easy. Dance like there's nobody watching, which means that don't worry so much about what everybody thinks about you. You just be yourself. The biggest curse that I would take away from myself, which is always a work in progress, is too much self-awareness to where I couldn't be who I really am in the moment that I was in. That's
Hmm.
an easy answer. Yeah, because you
Wow.
you can be cursed with too much self-awareness. So the
I
awareness is
very
good,
much get it.
but it's a sliding scale like everything else. You don't want to have zero awareness and just do things where, you can get hurt, but you don't want to be so aware and play it safe that, you don't explore.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And when we were talking about the tone of the way you use words. We've all heard that a million times, but your tone when saying it after hearing all your stories, it's very, very powerful.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I'm going to say this again. I could not believe, like, I just did it right there. The way you say a word changes the word. The way you say a word changes the word. If you just take away that today, you're going to notice a huge shift for yourself. But you may not be able to shift yourself yet, but I think what you're really going to love to do is try to shift somebody else. And that's what they tell you, that if you want to pull yourself out of the quicksand and you can't do it, you help pull somebody else out. And then you both come out together, right? You help
Yeah.
others.
So this might be the same answer, but it might not. But
Hmm.
this is what you would say to your younger self. And you have two boys, yes?
Yes, I do. Well, two men now,
Well,
27 and yeah, one's going to be 28 and one's 23. So I don't know how that happened.
oh my goodness. I think
Yeah,
I did a session with one of your sons when they were
Adam.
I thought
Yeah,
that he
he's
was like 15 or something. I does that even add up?
yeah probably because now he's a mechanical engineer, works in the city, and he's 6'7". So he's like,
He's 6'7"?
yeah, you worked with him when he was in high school, if
He
you
was in
remember.
high school. I mean, he was so shy.
Yes, he
Oh
was.
my oh
And he's not that way anymore. He works in the city. He lives in Hoboken. He's like colleges flipped the switch on him, and he grew. I'm the short one in the family now, and I'm 6'3".
my
Yeah.
I cannot believe this. I didn't know. How tall's the other one?
Well, he's about an inch shorter. Yeah. So, I used to be the one that would look down on them. Now I'm like looking up at them. Yeah, and there used to be a time, when dad could wrestle the boys and always win. Not anymore. Not anymore. And plus,
Oh my
my
gosh.
youngest, he's taking jujitsu and kickboxing. So I'm like, I'm not even going anywhere near you now. You win.
Bow down, Dad.
Yeah.
I love this so much. I love this so much. I didn't know I would love being a mother as much as I do. My
Oh, yeah.
oldest is 4, right?
Wow.
So I'm only 4 years into this game. That's where I'm at. And I'm like, I can't believe I love this so much. I love kids.
Mm,
I didn't know I would love them. I mean, I'm obsessed. And it's just such a wild ride. That's its own podcast, right?
that
Um,
sure is. Yeah.
so with that said, right, when you are raising humans, do you have a mantra or something that you would tell your boys if and when they do go through a difficult situation, a dark time, quicksand time, right? Where their finger is out? What would you
Mm.
say to them?
That's a good question. Well, they saw me go through mine, right? And they were actually very instrumental in helping me come through mine. Um,
Really?
yeah, 'cause I don't often share this, but I'll share it with you. Um, when I was really at my worst, I was teaching for Rock Tape, and I was teaching in New York State. And that's when I was really sick. I had difficult time standing for more than half an hour before I'd have to go lay down, and I had a lot of uro urogenital issues. So I was having to teach um, walking around wearing a catheter and a catheter bag and on
Ugh.
so many medications. And it was a really rough day. And I was driving home by myself and I was crying in the car. And I was just like, I've done everything. I've tried everything. And then for about 30 minutes, I just kept thinking, I could turn the wheel just a little bit. Like there's a pole, there's a guardrail. Like I could be it. And I said, "Oh, this is not." So I said, "I got to do something." I called a suicide hotline. I'm in my car, going home, and I spoke to someone on the other end for a few minutes, and then I signed off. And I said, "Thank you." I pulled home in my driveway. 10 minutes later, 2 police cars pull in my driveway because the hotline has to notify authorities if they think you're going to be harm yourself. And the police officers knocked on my door. And then that's when my wife and my young children at the time realized this is how bad I got. And that's the moment I said, okay, this is the pivotal decision point where I got to hang on for them, if not for me. And that was the deciding factor. So I always tell them that if they get to that point, they have each other, brothers. That's going to be the one that you go to. So
Yeah, that's very powerful.
No, I don't usually share that, but we had such a good podcast. So,
Yeah. But the fact that they do have each other, like you said, and I resonate with it because I have two girls and they're
yep,
2 years apart, and I see it now. They're little, but I already see it.
yep,
They have each other. They are intertwined without knowing that they are. But I see the primal exchanges, the face in the faces and the nooks and the crevices and and it's like, wow, we are primal creatures and they are forever connected. It's really powerful. So, okay, you would say to your younger self, dance like no one's watching. And for your boys, you have each other.
yes. That's the proverbial. You're never alone, even when you feel you are.
Mm, that's so wonderful. Thank you so much for
Hmm.
all the time that you donated to my community and everyone who will hear this. That is the point of this platform, is to make sure people know they are not alone. So what a great ending to the podcast. That was the whole point of the whole thing. So thank you so much. I honor you. I respect you. I love you. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you very much.
Ditto back. Uber ditto on that one. Yes. Thank you. Had a great time.
Yes. Good. And where to find you, I'm sure is pretty easy, but give us
Yeah. That's really simple one right there. Uh, just type in "stop chasing pain." I'm going to show up pretty much everywhere. So easy find.
just
Yep.
just type in "stop chasing pain" and have fun and learn some stuff. All
Yeah. I've
right.
been
I will
doing this a
talk.
long time. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. I will see you around. Thank you so much. We
You
appreciate
bet.
you. Okay. Bye.